Well, welcome back, everyone, to A Basic Conversation. And Father Bacik, this is Season 3, and we're finishing up the last episode of Season 3. And our Season 3 focus has been on impactful theologians and your impressions and reflections on them. This is the third season. That's pretty good, right?
It's a lot. How many of these have we done all together?
This is number 36.
We've done 36 podcasts.
35, this is 36. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And today, we're going to talk about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin.
Yeah.
And obviously, Jesuit paleontologist and theologian. We're going to talk about spirituality of work, but what type of background can you give us on Pierre?
Yeah, some of his vignettes in his life probably are important. He had a great natural love of the world. You could start out with that. And when he was young, I'm thinking 5, 6, somewhere around there, he took a lock of his hair and put it in a flame, and it burned up. And it was a shaping influence of him. Things burn up. I have this iron and it rusts. Things are not permanent. And this set him into an anxious funk. It was an anxiety he dealt with in his whole life, in a sense, until he found a sort of Christian answer to it. So he was a brilliant student, and he was a scientist. He studied paleontology. And he became at that time, one of the foremost experts on the geology of China. Spent time on digs. People go out, archaeologists, in China, and was part of some important discoveries. So he loved the earth, he loved the world, and so on. And so his problem came when he looked at his Catholic faith, that he grew up with, a traditional French Catholic faith, it seemed to be too world-denying, too much negativity about the world. And so he wrote a book called How I Believe, which I'm tracing that story here is what I'm doing, of how he tells the story of his own intellectual development. And so he began to think, I got to find another religious system that's going to help me. But I can't accept this Catholicism that I was learned because it's world-denying. It doesn't have any feeling for evolution and so on. So he looked at Eastern religions, because Eastern religions had a sense of the holistic character of the world, that everything's somehow connected, and he was attracted by that. But and he found in Buddhism and Hinduism also a sense of Maya, the world is finally not of that ultimate significance. He said, I can't do this Eastern religion thing. So he looked at Marxism. He had a lot of dialogue with important Marxist thinkers, because what he liked about them was that they were passionate about changing the world. Well, they recognized that religion could be an opiate and keep you from being concerned with the world, and they wanted to do something about it. They wanted to change the world and make it a better place. Oh, that's good. That's what I like. And then when he investigated that more, but they don't have any sense of spirituality. They don't have a sense of transcendence. So I can't go in that route. So he's now stuck. What's he going to do? And what does he do? He goes back and he looks at his Catholic heritage. He rereads the epistles of Paul. And in there he finds 3 big passages. One is Romans 8, where it says, the whole world groans coming to birth, until it shares the victory of the sons and daughters of God. Aha! Here's a more positive sense. The whole world groans. The world is going to share in the final victory of Christianity. And then he read Ephesians, first chapter of Ephesians, first chapter of Colossians, and what he finds there is the cosmic Christ. The cosmic Christ. Christ is the center of the universe. Christ is the linchpin that holds it all together. It's all connected in with Jesus Christ. And so here he put together two ideas. He put together his science idea, is that scientifically he felt the whole world is evolving. And as the world, as matter becomes more complex, it becomes more conscious. In other words, a rock has very little consciousness. Animals have more consciousness, and humans have even more. And so he called that the law of complexity consciousness. The more complex matter became, the more consciousness it had. And it was moving upward and coalescing. And so he called that the omega point. Just from his scientific viewpoint, what he believed passionately and felt in his guts and was going to hang on to, the world is evolving. It's moving towards greater consciousness. And someday it's going to be full consciousness. And he called that the omega point. Omega point. I mean, he could have called it anything, I suppose. But it's sort of the final point, omega, alpha and omega.
We're aspiring to that.
Yeah. Yeah. That influence, Flannery O'Connor wrote some of her short stories following Teilhard's ideas. Everything that rises converges. And it connects anyway. So here he's got an absolute conviction about omega point. That's what the world's about. That's where it's going. That's the most important thing we can say. And then when he discovered the cosmic Christ, Romans 8, Colossians 1, Ephesians 1, first chapters about the universal Christ, he had his great eureka moment of his life. Eureka, that's Archimedes is in the baths and discovers the displacement of water, and he runs out of the bath saying, Eureka, I figured it out. So this is Teilhard's Eureka moment, is omega point, is the cosmic Christ. Now he's put his faith together with his intuitions about life. And now he spends the rest of his life playing that out in many different ways. I'll tell you what I do with people. Here's how I would summarize that. What Teilhard figured out, his primary negative, things are not permanent. He then came up with a primary positive. That is, the world's, it's not going to, it's somehow kept. It's going towards omega point. And then he found part of his belief system that worked. And in a sense, like on a retreat, I would ask people to say, what's your primary negative in life? Well, today we know, a lot of recent studies say, for a lot of people it is, I'm alone. I suffer from loneliness. More and more we're seeing that. We're suffering from loneliness. Some people would say, my primary negative is that I feel unworthy. I never measure up. Some people have what we call the imposter syndrome, where they're afraid people will find out how poor they are, how dumb they are, how not as good as everyone thinks they are, the imposter syndrome. I knew great theologians who had that imposter syndrome, by the way, and it's a hard thing to deal with. And for my own primary negative, I say it's massive evil. It's the Holocaust. I remember going through. Did I say this before? I went through Dachau as a tourist, and nobody knew where Dachau was as I was trying to find it, and so on. It was a shaping experience for me. I was noticing a father and his son, father trying to explain to his son the significance of the Holocaust. It was just overwhelming to me. and still is. I cannot watch a Holocaust movie. I can't. If they have guests on talk shows talking about their Holocaust experience, I have to turn it off. I can't deal with it.
So that's your primary negative.
Yeah. So that's my primary negative is the monstrous evil, the Gulag in Russia, the killing fields of Pol Pot, monstrous evil. And so then my primary positive is, despite that, in my guts, just in the way I feel about life, I think life is meaningful. I consider that a gift. All faith is a gift. I would call that faith. That's my faith. Primary positive is that I think the world makes sense. I think that it's meaningful and not finally absurd. I didn't figure it out. That's not a plus and minus thing. How much evil is there? It's just the way I feel. I think the world makes sense, and that it's good to live that way. I call that my primary positive or my faith. Now, what about my belief? Now I turn to my Catholic tradition that I grew up in, the family, and the part of it that jumps out at me, of course, is the resurrection. Despite the absurdity of the crucifixion of Jesus, despite the enormity of the evil, despite the misunderstandings surrounding it, death was not the final word for Jesus. God raised Jesus to life, and he becomes life-giving spirit for us. So that's the part of the Christian message that grabs me and that I feel easiest preaching about or talking about. Jesus conquered death. Jesus was raised to life, and he shares that life with us. That feels right to me. And so what happened, that's my example. What am I putting on a primary negative? The world absurdity of monstrous evil. A faith that is purely a gift, that I still think life makes sense. I still think it makes sense to get up in the morning, to try my best. And the part of the belief system that grabs me is this idea of resurrection.
I can imagine that primary negative and then your primary positive, when you do pastoring, individual counseling with people that are struggling with things, that serves as a base.
You're absolutely right. I use it a lot. I use it I've been at wedding receptions when somebody comes up with a problem, and I will use it. That distinction between faith and belief. So people go, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, and so on. So what would I do? How's your life? Well, my wife has dementia, but I go feed her every day. Really? That must be hard. That's hard for sure, I'll tell you. She doesn't know who I am. And so why do you keep doing that? Oh, well, I think it's the right thing to do. Oh, and so I've now entered into a conversation about it, and at some point I might interject, well, you know that Catholic faith that you gave up 20 years ago? And there's elements of that would tell you it's a good idea to keep going feeding your wife, and that it's a good thing to do, and that it's the right thing to do. And in other words, what I'm getting to, that your faith, your belief system can help you to keep motivated to feed your wife and to love her and take care of her in every way you can. So I use it all the time in dealing with, in counseling or saying advice.
Because it could be easy for all of us to lose hope or a sense of meaning in the face of whatever that negative is.
Yeah, the negative can overwhelm us. And if it doesn't, it's a gift. We've all, traditional Catholic theology said faith is a gift. which we hold along with our Protestant friends, Orthodox friends. Faith is a gift from God. We don't earn it. We don't figure it out. It comes. And so this man who's feeding his wife thinks that that's the right thing to do. And he's following that particular faith. And it's possible that to have an element of the belief system that will help him. Christ said we should. What about that faith? Remember when you were in Catholic grade school and said that we were all called to feed our neighbor? Jesus says, you were rewarded. You fed your neighbor. You fed me. Maybe that's possible. I mean, a man's fine. He might get along. He might not need that belief system, but it could help him. What you're doing is exactly what Jesus said to do. I was hungry and you fed me. And when you did that, you know what? When you're doing that for your wife, you're doing that for me. And at some point I'm going to say to you, come and take part, take your reward. Come and join the communion of saints because you followed what I taught you. So it's a powerful way to do retreats or counseling or whatever. Anyway, yeah.
So Teilhard, the meaningfulness, he applied in every aspect of life, but especially to work. And in your chapter that you wrote about him in Contemporary Theologians, you focused on spirituality at work, in work.
I did. You're right. And I haven't said anything about that yet. Do we have any time left?
We do.
In this?
We do.
Yeah, I did choose that for various reasons. Try to put it this way. Teilhard said, well, it's a good thing when you're going to work tomorrow and you're not, the workplace is not congenial, and you don't like going there, and you got a Sunday night syndrome, you don't sleep well because you got to go to work on Monday. Say a morning offering. Tell God, I dedicate my work to you. And that might help. But Teilhard said, well, okay, good, but there's something deeper, and that is your work is of intrinsic value. It's essentially valuable thing to do. Whatever the work is you do, no matter how toilsome or how tedious or frustrating it is, you are sharing in God's creative activity. You are, in one way or another, it's of value in itself, even if it doesn't bring you a lot of happiness or whatever. So that's his big thing about work, is that work is positively, it is sharing in God's creative activity, therefore it's worthwhile, it's a good thing. And also Teilhard was big on the fact that doing our work is a way of actualizing ourselves, of fulfilling our potential. In other words, when you go in and do a good job, you're becoming a better person. And because you're a better person at work, you might well be a better husband or a better father. So that all fits together for him.
I remember a sermon, this is a long time ago, you gave, see if you remember this, that you shared with us in the congregation that you were counseling a businessman.
Yeah.
And he really disliked it and was going to quit.
Yeah.
Because he didn't feel like it fit his value system. And you said to him, I'm paraphrasing, that you can stay and make it better, because if all the good people leave,
I remember now.
Then where does that leave the organization or your industry?
It's the same way with the church. That's what Rosemary Ruther said. If we all leave the church, we have no leverage to make it better.
Stay on the inside and make it better.
Stay in the ball game, and then you got a shot at trying to make it better. I like it that people actually remember what I said in a homily.
It was a while ago, too.
That's a lot of years ago.
That's a couple of decades. But it resonated. It struck a chord with me that every job I have isn't going to be wonderful, or parts of the job, or times of the job, and to persevere, and you just can't leave. You stay. There's some intrinsic worth to just staying and trying to make it better, doing the best you can.
Yeah. for sure. In other words, it's a very practical approach to work in one sense.
Yes.
I'm thinking about one of the things that Teilhard wrote was called A Mass Upon the World. And he was in the Gobi Desert doing field work and digs in China, and he had no bread or wine to say Mass. So what he did was he thought of the whole world as his altar. The whole material is now his altar. And he doesn't have bread, so the bread is going to be all of the work right now. All the people are putting forth energy, doing good things, a vast amount of energy. That's the host I'm offering. And there's a lot of suffering going on in the world. And that's the wine I'm offering. So he called it the Mass Upon the World. So it was his way of showing that I think he had a line that nothing is profane for those who have belief. Nothing is profane. It's not there's a secular world and a profane world and then a holy world. He wrote a book called The Divine Milieu. Wonderful thing. In other words, he said, we're all living in a divine milieu, an environment, as the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins said, an environment charged with the grandeur of God, a world charged with the grandeur of God. The whole world is graced. There is no secular world. There is no profane world. There's even philosophers who deny the existence of God, like Heidegger did in many ways. Rahner or Teilhard would say that, there was a secret theological dimension. There's a secret faith dimension at work in that kind of thinking, because the world is filled with God's grace. And it's, as Teilhard would insist, that grace is more powerful than all of the negativity that attacks it.
And there was some criticism for Teilhard, right, as far as this idea that you can always find meaning and significance in your work. So there was some criticism of that as maybe being Pollyanna in some people's cases, right?
Yeah, take us back. Teilhard was influential on the Second Vatican Council and the document on the church in the modern world. It has ideas from Teilhard that are optimistic about the world and see it in a positive way. Divine milieu, graced world. There's end up being many criticisms of that document, that Vatican II was naive and didn't see the sinful side of the world enough and was overly optimistic, Pollyannish about the world. And that's been the criticism of Teilhard, and it became the criticism of Vatican II document on the church in the modern world. Teilhard is not a great influential figure these days. Other people have taken up that mantle. Like in the Catholic Theologians Society of America, that's the professional society for Catholic theologians in the United States. There's a Rahner Society that I belong to, and there's a Baldazarian Society that follows Hans. But there's no, as far as I know, any Teilhardian society. There's no big Teilhardian movement these days to incorporate his thought. But others have picked up his general idea of the world evolving in a positive way and so on, and have found probably better or more popular ways of speaking about it. So the idea of finding a evolutionary frame that makes sense to people is still powerful, but it's not always tinged with Teilhard's thought himself. So what work? What else you get about work? Anything practical that came out about? Well, how that phrase comes back to me. We can find God at the tip of the shovel
And the pen.
Of the pen.
Or the pen. It's something. The shovel and the pen.
Yeah. There was a third one, too. The needle.
The needle.
Yeah. In other words, various types of work that God has found. Yeah, I like that phrase. God is right there trying to divinize our work.
Maybe this applies, but it's more broader. It's probably one of his more famous statements, and that is, we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Say that again.
We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah. Well, it's back to the whole idea that we live in a graced world. I mean, any experience is an experience of God, even though we don't recognize it, because God is the pervasive influence in the whole world. We are hardwired in our brains to be open to this idea of a spiritual dimension of life. And so the more we can do that, the greater motivation we find to do our work well. I think there's a lot of satisfaction that comes from doing our job well. Don't you think? I mean,
Giving it
in
our
the
best.
athletic world, we say that, we played a great game. We prepared well. We lost by 4 points, but, there's something valuable. Hitters these days what they do is they're trying to find a way. See, baseball is a team of failure, right? The best hitters fail usually. Can count on it. When they go to the plate, you're rooting for them to get a hit. The odds are they're not going to get it, right? Most times they will fail. And so what happens is that the young players get down on themselves. And so one of the tricks that they try is to every at-bat is not based, did I get a hit or not? Did I hit a home run or not? But what did I do right? I fouled off a tough pitch. I had a good swing at a curveball in the outside corner. I took a pitch that was just slightly high. In other words, so that every bat, you're not defeated by how you didn't do it well. And I think that's so important because in baseball, you got to figure out how you deal with failure, since it's a constant game of failure. And I find that to be a current technique that some hitters are using, so they're 0 for 4 and they're angry at their wife after that or something.
I love the fact that you infuse baseball into a discussion about Teilhard. That is wonderful. Not too many theologians can do that.
That's true. You're probably never going to hear another podcast that links Teilhard to baseball.
I think it's a great
That's probably
linkage.
true. But Brad, did we do enough with work?
I think we did.
You're a hard worker. Is anything else that struck you?
Yeah, the search for meaning and significance and whatever our roles are is a worthy task and pursuit. And when we can't find it, we offer it up to God.
Yeah.
And to try to persevere through. And in that perseverance, there's significance in and of itself.
Oh, well said. Let's stop with that.
Let's do that. Father Bacik, thank you.